Alcohol decreases your ability to regulate heat. If you're out in the hot sun, be very careful because you may not be able to drink as many beers as you normally drink, or you may be making yourself at higher risk for a heat emergency. So I just tell people really be careful, enjoy yourself, but don't overdo it in the sun.
She blinded me with science. She blinded me
Welcome back to What the Health is Happening with Dr. V. I'm Layla, and I'm happy to be helping you transition your radio show to a podcast. And we're back with another great episode. And today we're talking about heat right in time for the summer. But before we jump into things, how are you, Dr. V? It's been a while. How's everything going?
Everything is going great. I'm keeping cool over here.
Amazing, amazing. As you definitely should. It's pretty hot here in New York City, and just in time for summer, like I said. So happy to dive into things because I think heat is something that people don't really consider to be something that could be dangerous, but in fact it is. Every year, heat kills more people in this country than any other weather event, which to me was pretty fascinating to learn. It kills more people than hurricanes, more than floods, more than tornadoes. And most of those deaths actually happen quietly. No warning siren, no dramatic collapse on camera, just a body that got too hot for too long and nobody around really knew what to look for. So today on What the Health is Happening, we're talking about heat in depth and how it actually breaks down the body and why some people are at far greater risk than others, and how to tell the difference between I need some water and shade and this is actually a medical emergency, call 911 right now. And because that difference matters, it can be the difference between someone walking it off and someone not walking away at all. And if you work outside, exercise outside, have kids or older parents, or just live somewhere that gets really hot, this episode is for you. So let's get into it. And
all right, let's go.
With my first question for you, Dr. Let's do it. And let's just kind of start with the basics. So, Dr. V, what is actually happening inside the body when someone overheats?
So when somebody overheats, what's happening is the body temperature rises, and then you get a breakdown of all sorts of protein. You get what I would call almost like whole body cellular injury. And you also get inflammation all over the place. The brain is probably affected the most, and probably you see that first because the brain uses a lot of energy. So it is really sort of destruction at a cellular level when your body begins to really, really overheat.
And then heat stroke is one of the most common issues with being overheated. So I think it's also one of the most common things that people hear about and one of the things that people definitely fear the most. So what exactly is happening in the body when it crosses that line?
Yeah. So the most mild form is what we would call like heat cramps, where people get sort of like a muscle cramp. They may get a little bit of pain, some spasm of their muscle. And then probably the next you get before you get to heat stroke is heat exhaustion. And that's where your temperature really starts to rise, right? So, your body is normally 97, 98 degrees, and your body begins to rise to 99, 100, 101. Then people with the heat exhaustion, they literally can feel exhausted. So that's how I sort of remember it. They get lightheaded, sleepy, or maybe I can't walk or tired. And that is sort of heat exhaustion. Heat stroke is very different because heat stroke is where your body actually loses the ability to regulate its temperature. And at that point, somebody's temperature is usually 104 or more. And they may have confusion. They may have seizures. They may not know where they are. There could be some form of delirium. And that is really where the body is really in a dangerous situation because it doesn't know, is no longer able to regulate its temperature. So it's literally going to go up to whatever temperature the environment is.
And then from an ER standpoint, what are some of the warning signs people tend to miss or brush off? Because even what you said about heat exhaustion and heat stroke, I feel like people are hot, they can easily brush that off. But from an ER standpoint, I'm sure there's a lot of signs that people just miss.
Yeah, I think the main sign is that when you feel lightheaded or woozy, I think a lot of times people think, well, I can just go over here in the shade and I can drink some water and it'll pass. And maybe sometimes it does, maybe sometimes it doesn't. And if just removing yourself from the hot environment and drinking water does not resolve things in a matter of a couple of minutes, you probably should be calling 911 because it can get really out of control pretty fast. When I've seen these emergencies, these are patients that go to the ICU. And it can be very, very deadly. So I think a lot of times people think, well, let me just get some water, let me just sit down and it'll pass. Um, if it doesn't pass quickly, you need to seek emergency help.
Absolutely. And then we're talking about heat stroke and heat exhaustion, and I think that there's probably certain populations that are affected more. But is
Mhm.
there, or actually, who is most at risk here? Populations? Is it just really people that are working outdoors, athletes, or is there who's most at risk?
Yeah, so the people that are most at risk are definitely like your athletes and people working outdoors. We see a lot of deaths in the summer related to folks that are practicing football in July and August, right? And usually they're teenagers. But the most vulnerable people are the very young babies and the very old. I would say sort of over 65. And the reason for that is that one is babies are little heat engines all unto themselves. If you ever pick up a baby is usually a little bit warmer than the rest of us, right? And then the other thing about babies is they really don't have their sweat glands haven't really developed, so you don't really see babies sweat. And sweating is a major way that our body actually decreases its temperature. And then the other thing that happens with babies is that they have to depend upon adults for water. They have to depend upon adults to move them to a cooler environment. They have to depend upon adults to take some of their clothes off so they're not as hot. So small infants and babies are very much at risk. Older people are also at risk because they sort of have, with age, their body doesn't respond as quickly as it should. And so some of the thermal regulation mechanisms don't work as well. Older people don't sweat as well. Their vessels don't dilate as quickly as when they were younger. So there's all of these reasons that kind of make the young and the old sort of the most vulnerable.
Absolutely. And I wasn't aware about babies. I know it's common for the elderly population, pets too, to really be able to
Hmm.
catch heat
Yeah.
stroke and get sick. That's interesting about babies too. And let's talk about what to actually do if you do suspect someone is having a heat emergency. What are the first
Yeah.
steps?
Yeah. So the first step is if you see someone having a heat emergency, obviously you need to call 911. And while you're waiting from 911, you need to make sure to remove them from whatever the hot environment is. If you can get them into some shade, that would help. If you can get them easily indoors into an air conditioned environment, that also helps. A lot of people, when people are like lightheaded and weak, people always try to sit people up or stand people up. Let them lay down on the ground. It's fine. It's actually probably better because, again, you want blood flow to your brain. If you want more blood flow to your brain, you'd lay down on the ground, right? And so it is most important to protect your brain. So don't try to sit people up or stand people up or make them walk any sort of far distance. If you can, quickly get them into a shaded environment. Also, any sort of fanning helps. I tell people it's important not to try to give someone water that has an altered mental status or is confused. If the person actually is, awake enough that they know what's going on, then you could go ahead and give them water. But you can put water on their skin and fan them. These are the sorts of things that kind of will help until emergency personnel get there.
That's good to know because I would have naturally thought the opposite. I would have tried to give them water, and I'm sure that that's a misconception that a lot of people would have as well. And
Yeah,
I
if
think that's
someone's
something that
confused,
comes up a lot.
I was just gonna say, yeah, if someone's confused and delirious, the last thing you want to do is you don't want to make them aspirate, right? Like aspirate, and they're so confused they can't really swallow or know what to do. So yeah.
Absolutely. And then something that else comes up a lot is when we talk about heat in general is cars. Cars come up every summer. Kids
Mhm.
and pets left inside, sometimes for what feels like just a few minutes. But there's a huge danger around that. So what's actually happening inside of a hot car?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Some of the newer cars now, when you get out of them, they'll send you a warning that there's something in the back of your seat. Right. So some of the newer cars now are actually coming with warning lights so that way, you get that information. But the cars are extremely dangerous. I tell people in 10 minutes, a car heats up about 20 degrees. So it moves really, really fast. There's no amount of quick in and out you can really do anywhere and leave any sort of animal or child or anything like that in the car. The car heats up it's almost like an oven. It just heats up too fast to really leave any real living thing in your car when you're going to do an errand or anything. So it takes a little bit more work to take the kids or take the pets with you, but you really do have to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that that's a big thing. I'm a pet owner. I don't have kids, but as a pet
Yes.
owner, you want to leave your dog outside for a second or your dog in the car. And it's like one of the first
Yeah.
things that I think people tend to get like really worried about, especially like I've been in parking
Yeah.
lots and seen like dogs in cars and like scratching at the window, and people freak out because it is so scary to leave them unattended. And the car, even if you're just sitting in a car sometimes and it's off and you're in the car, it gets so hot and stuffy, and I could definitely see how that would be such a huge danger.
Yeah,
And another thing that comes up,
I actually tell people if you see a dog or a child in a car, call 911. You know what I mean? Because they may be doing well when you're there, but they might not have that much time. And you might be the person that really saves them.
mhm, absolutely. And then another thing that comes up when we talk about heat, obviously, is hydration. But there's a lot of messaging around hydration. But is just drink more water actually enough, or is there a lot more that we need to do? Like maybe let's say electrolytes. What else is important?
Yeah, so I think that, I think drinking regular water is usually enough. I think that when you get into the water that has additives, you have to really be careful because some of the waters has sugar, and some of these waters that say they have electrolytes also have food coloring. So I tell people, I would be really careful about water that I drink that has additives. You want to make sure you know what you're actually drinking because some of these have food colorings and sugar, and you just be better off drinking plain old water if that's the case.
Absolutely. And then, especially for those that are exercising and being outdoors and working in heat, hydration is obviously important. But what does smart pacing actually look like? And what exactly is smart pacing?
So, smart pacing when it comes to like exercise and exertion is when you really kind of like take many breaks while you're actually doing your exercise. So, for instance, if you decide you're going to walk 3 miles, maybe you might normally just walk 3 miles. And with smart pacing, you'd walk 1 mile, take a 15-20 minute break, walk another mile, take a 15-20 minute break, walk another mile, and take a 15-20 minute break. So you kind of break it up. Same thing if you're playing pickleball or tennis or basketball or whatever you may be doing that's outside, is you just break up what you're doing more so your body gets more rest and you're less likely to actually suffer any sort of heat emergency.
Okay, got it. And then another thing that I'm curious about too is how does the body normally regulate its temperature in any of these situations involving heat?
Yeah, so when the body is functioning normally, the main center of your body that actually regulates heat in your body is your hypothalamus, and your hypothalamus is really deep in the center of your brain. And basically, what your hypothalamus does is it actually signals to your sweat glands to start sweating. And then when the sweat is on the skin, the evaporation of your sweat actually helps to dissipate heat. The other thing that it does is it dilates your blood vessels that are really close to your skin. And that also evaporates heat. And then lastly, you'll find that as you get hot, whether or not you're exercising or not exercising, you start to breathe faster. And that is another way where you actually begin to dissipate heat from the body. So the hypothalamus is sort of controlling all of these things. So it really kind of keeps your body right at 98.7, whether or not you're in any sort of environment.
And then another thing that I'm curious about too is for those that are outside a lot in the heat, is there such a thing as building up a heat tolerance? And if so, how long does that actually take, if that is in fact a thing?
So some people say they are heat tolerant, right? Which to me kind of, I'm not sure what they mean by that, but I know that, some people, their body regulates temperature faster. You'll hear some people say, I don't sweat, right? Well, sweating is a major part of tolerating heat, right? So someone who doesn't sweat is not going to tolerate heat as well. So every person has a different ability to actually tolerate heat and thermal regulate. And then also a lot of people, based upon where you were born or where you grew up, if you were born in a particularly cold climate or if you were born in a particularly warm climate, they've acclimated to a certain amount of heat or a certain amount of cold. And so some people, that's also what they're referring to. They may have grown up in a warmer environment and they're used to a certain amount of heat. And we do see that.
And then for those that come into the ER that do have heat emergencies, how do you go about treating them?
Yeah. So the first thing is we take off all their clothes. And we will often have like a cooling blanket that we will put on them. We'll sometimes have cooling fluids. We'll have sometimes cooling ice packs that we might put underneath their arms. That's another thing that can be done out in the field if you're waiting for an ambulance or something, is to put ice packs underneath someone's arm or in their groin area. That helps to sort of cool them. We also give them cooled air. So your lungs have a lot of surface area. So we'll give them cooled air to actually breathe. The main thing is, though, we bring their temperature down gradually. We don't rush to bring their temperature down. We kind of bring their temperature down gradually and allow them to acclimate. If they're in a true heat stroke situation, we do try to get them. I've seen patients where their body temperature has been like 106, 107. We're going to rapidly get someone down to 103, 102, and then from there, gradually get them down to a normal body temperature. So that's kind of what we do in the emergency department.
Interesting. And then also, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but what are the signs that someone needs to seek a cooling center or an ER or medical help rather than just trying to really manage it at home?
Yeah, I would say, if you're feeling weak or lightheaded and you sit down and drink some water and it doesn't go away in a couple minutes and you're not feeling better in a couple minutes, I would call and get some help. If you're just normally tired from walking, you should sit down and rest, drink a little water, and usually in a couple minutes, you feel better. And if you don't feel better, it is something more serious.
Absolutely. And then for listeners who do want to be prepared for the next heat wave, we're only midway through summer, so it's likely we're all going to get hit with another heat wave this year. What should they actually do today before anything becomes urgent or an emergency?
Yeah, so I tell people, one is, if you have air conditioning in your house, get your air conditioning serviced. If you don't have air conditioning, get yourself some fans. I'm seeing and loving a lot of these neck fans that people are wearing around their necks. There's also these neck air conditioners where it's not just blowing air, it's actually blowing cool air. And I tell people, keep refrigerated water, make sure you have some cool water and take it with you when you go somewhere. I think these are the things to really, be prepared, and also look for situations that may cause problems. And I'm going to tell you what I see. I see people at amusement parks that cause problems, concerts where they're at an all-day concert, so they're out in the heat all day. Again, exercising with equipment on, particularly football equipment. These are sort of the situations that are what I call sort of high risk situations. So really make sure before you go to an amusement park or an all day jazz festival that you've really got a plan.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then I think planning is an important thing. I recently bought a little one of those like little handheld fans that everyone's walking
Yeah.
around with for a
Yes.
concert. And I with me everywhere now. I love it. It's the best invention ever. And I have like seen the ones I remember, wow, I just got a flashback of like my childhood, but it was those little fans that would like spray out the water. I haven't
Yes.
seen those in
Yes.
forever, but I remember
Yes.
loving those.
Yes.
I think I
They're
guess I have some
really
like
good.
upgraded versions of those.
Right.
Mhm.
Exactly.
They are, especially if you're going to be out, like you said, in an all day event, like a concert or something like that. Those are super, super important. And I'm saying this from my own perspective, but what should a basic heat safety plan look like for a family? Is there anything different that they should be prepared for?
I would just say for a family, you're especially if you're dealing with infants or small children, just realize that, little kids don't really sweat like we do, and they can get overheated very fast. So I would say, the main thing is to really watch the little ones and watch the grandparents and the aunts and uncles, the older folks, because they may not show the same signs that we do.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to know that because I think that it seems like common knowledge if you are around kids a lot, for example, but if you're not around kids a lot and
Yeah.
you're, watching kids for the day or something like that, with my if I was to take out my nephews, I don't know if I would have potentially realized that, yeah, kids their bodies are different. They show heat in different
Yeah.
ways and sweat in different ways. And like you said, they sweat less. So it's good. That's definitely a good reminder for people to really hear
Yeah.
and know about. And before I wrap up this episode with you, Dr. V, and ask for your final word, is there anything else that you want to add or touch on either from the medical side or just from your perspective that is crucial for people to know when it comes to heat?
Well, I would say the other thing that's crucial when it comes to, I was talking about the amusement parks and the outdoor music festivals. Um, Alcohol decreases your ability to regulate heat. Right. So if you're out in the hot sun, be very careful because you may not be able to drink as many beers as you normally drink, or you may be making yourself at higher risk for for a heat emergency. So I just tell people really be careful, enjoy yourself, but don't overdo it in the sun.
Absolutely. And also when you're drinking and you feel hotter as it is naturally. So you'll
Yeah.
feel it a lot differently. I know if I'm
Right.
out in a concert and I have a few drinks, I'm like, all right, you just feel different. You feel a little lightheaded
Hmm.
faster and you feel
Yeah.
hotter or hotter than you typically would. So that's definitely a good point. And actually that leads me to another question before we do the
Mhm.
final word. We talk about dehydration, I think a lot just in life, but is there such a thing as being overhydrated? Because I have heard that.
No, not
Can you
really.
overhydrate? Is that a real risk in heat situations? Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
assuming
I was like, I've
assuming
heard.
that you actually have, yeah. So assuming that you actually have, you don't have any sort of cardiac disease, right, or kidney disease, you've got a normal functioning body. Then what's going to happen is, if you drink too much water, your body's just going to urinate it out, right? And so now people who have heart disease and have congestive heart failure, or have kidney disease and they have a function where, where they're not able to urinate, those folks can actually get too much fluid on board. And they usually monitor how well they're doing with their weight. Right. Because if they get too much fluid on board, they can't get it out. But a normal functioning person with normal functioning heart and normal functioning kidneys, if you drink too much, your body will take care of that. You'll just go to the restroom a little bit more.
Good to know. And final word before we wrap up. What do you really want every listener to take away from this episode?
What I want everyone to really take away from is that, these temperatures outside are getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And you really, really do have to have a plan. And you really have to kind of be cognizant and aware of those around you. I think that's really the main thing. This can sneak up on you so fast. It is just amazing how fast it can actually sneak up on you. So I just tell people, whether or not it's buying a neck fan or drinking a little less alcohol or making sure you have some cold water available, going someplace and knowing immediately where is the shade, right? You just have to actually know where everything is and be a little bit more and be prepared.
Absolutely. Those are definitely good tips. And thinking about where the shade is a good idea too. Cause I know when
Yeah,
you're out and you get so hot and you're just like, I want some shade. I need to get out of the sun and you have nowhere to go. Thinking about that ahead of time, I think is a really
right.
good tip also. And
Absolutely.
And heat safety isn't complicated, but it does require paying attention to your own body and to the people around you who might not be able to advocate for themselves in certain moments. And also, like you mentioned, knowing your surroundings and know the signs, know who's at risk, and know when someone's confused, not sweating, and overheated. And that is not a walk it off situation. That's a call 911 situation. Now we really know the signs of what to look for those who can't advocate for themselves and for how we're feeling as well. And really knowing the difference between being hot and potentially having an emergency. So if this episode gave you something to watch for the summer, make sure you share it with someone who works outside, coaches a team, or checks in on an older parent, has pets or has kids also is definitely people to share it with. And it might be the thing that really helps them catch an emergency in time. So make sure you're following the show so you don't miss what's next. Dr. V, it's a pleasure seeing you as always.
Thank
Again, I'm
you.
Layla and I'm so happy to be here to be helping you transition your amazing radio show to podcast in video format and on all the streaming services. And until then, stay curious, stay clear, and take care of yourselves. And we'll see you on the next episode.